People often begin regaling some story about their recent lives by saying, if you told me 12 months ago that this thing would have happened, I wouldn't have believed you. But the truth is, these things are rarely unbelievable, often in fact entirely plausible within life's wondrous sequence of events. And so it is a phrase I try to avoid. But this year I'm willing to make an exception, because if you had told me 12 months ago that this would be the year the world all but came to a halt, I wouldn't have even thought that that was possible.
For me, 2020 should have been remembered as the year Kristen and I finally moved in together, having bought our first home in January. Work to furnish and redecorate was always going to keep us and our parents busy in the months ahead. But clearly it was something else entirely that would dominate all of our lives.
There are fears of a major outbreak of a potentially deadly new virus in China.
Before we knew it, this distant disease had spread across Asia and was extending its grip on Europe and America. Inevitably, the UK's first cases were soon identified, but the advice was simply to wash your hands more thoroughly, more often.
I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody. Washing your hands is the crucial thing.
But soap and water proved not enough, and with escalating deaths, the Prime Minister finally made this momentous announcement.
I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
Shops closed, streets emptied, and panic buying led to national shortages of loo roll.
Welcome to day number 1.
But by and large, with remarkable speed, people adapted well to the so-called new normal. Hey, hello boys! This is how it's gonna be. With daily televised briefings, it was impossible to lose sight of the grim reality of it all. And the night Boris Johnson was hospitalised with the virus, it fell to Her Majesty to offer comfort to an anxious nation.
While we may have more still to endure, better days will return.
As everyone got used to social distancing, neighbourhoods were actually brought closer. First with the weekly clap for carers, a chance to show support for those on the COVID front line. And then with street celebrations for the 75th anniversary of VE Day. We each got stuck into new hobbies: knitting, gardening, baking, even, by necessity, hairdressing. That's terrifying. We also made the most of a glorious spring, with a range of bike rides and evening strolls as permitted under the regulations. Lockdown walks!
At one point, this daily exercise was the only adventure we were allowed.
But as restrictions gradually eased, proper days out became possible, and we were at last allowed to meet with our friends and families once again, at a 2-metre distance, of course.
Happy birthday to you.
I am immensely fortunate that my work continued unabated this year, albeit with added posters around the office, and I really do feel privileged to have been in the network newsroom as we covered every twist and turn of this pandemic.
A very significant development tonight. The Prime Minister has been moved to intensive care.
Dominic Cummings investigated by the police for breaking coronavirus lockdown rules.
A moment of joy after months of heartache. The 90-year-old British woman who's the first in the world to get the COVID vaccine.
The other big stories of the year included the Australian bushfires, the explosion in Beirut, and the Aegean earthquake. Back here, Britain left the EU.
This is a deal.
The Sussexes left the UK, and a ScotRail train left the tracks at Stonehaven in the country's worst rail disaster since 2002. There was also, of course, George Floyd's death in Minnesota, which sparked global Black Lives Matter protests and made race one of the major issues of the US election. This year was not a complete write-off. There were those early months when we freely enjoyed our lives, blissfully unaware of all that was to come. And then for the rest of the year, we learnt to adapt to what felt like constantly changing rules. The final weeks of 2020 were like few had anticipated, but it all made for a Christmas few will forget.
Happy Christmas!
Key, perhaps, was a spirit of quiet determination, best embodied by Captain Tom Moore. His sponsored walk raised millions for the NHS and earned him a place in the hearts of the nation.
Things will get better and we shall get through this.
It is sometimes hard in the darkest of days to find hope, and so it is especially cheering that this year so many have chosen to illuminate their homes. A doorstep display of defiance against this winter of all winters, and a reminder that brighter days will come.